Hello and welcome back, my Royal Rogues. My name is Jesus Enrique Rosas. I'm the Royal Rogue, and I had the pleasure of interviewing Lady Colin Campbell about her brand new book, Meghan and Harry, The Real Story, Persecutors or Victims, a new, updated, and expanded edition that you can get using the link in the description of this video. Needless to say, it is a great honor to interview Lady C, and just a small warning, there's some strong language ahead because this conversation is uncensored and with zero edits. So let's go. Lady C, thank you for allowing me the honor of interviewing you on your new book on Harry and Meghan, the topic that has gotten us together this evening. Meghan and Harry, The Real Story, Persecutors or Victims. Lady C, it's absolutely a complete pleasure to be here and, well, being able to ask you the questions not only about this book, but, about the enigma of Meghan and Harry. It has so many dimensions to this that I would love to know your insights about this. And the first question, the first thing that went through my head when I found out that you were writing this new book was, what was the most surprising discovery that you found out doing the research for this updated edition?
Oh, goodness, that's a difficult question to answer. I think it was the enormity of it all. I really think it's the enormity of it all and the tremendous amount of damage that they have done, and how unnecessary the whole thing has been. It's like starting out being a billionaire and throwing it all into the sea and then trying to exchange stones for money. There's an element of total insanity to the whole thing that I suppose that's the most surprising thing of it all, that people could be given so much and squander it for a bit more. I mean, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, when you say a bit more, one can imagine that they had some sort of plan because, well, one can only suppose that they had a plan. Do you think they really had a plan when they went through all this, or they just went with it like rebels or something?
No, I have to say my researches lead me to conclude that she had a plan from the word go, that she is the ultimate opportunist, and that from the very word, I think that all those years of Doria saying to her, you mustn't give the milk away free, you must always milk a situation. Doria brought up the absolute ultimate exploiter, and she's not been able to understand that when you have so much as she had on the plate, you actually don't need to gorge yourself on the whole meal at once and then decide afterwards, as your belly's about to burst, that you want some more, because her greed is extraordinary. And, there's a reason why one of the 7 deadly sins is gluttony, and why pride is another of the 7 deadly sins. And Meghan envy is another one of them. And Meghan is the ideal representative of all the 7 deadly sins rolled into one body. And it's really a morality tale in action, I think. And I find it beyond belief that this woman could have been offered so much, and all she needed to be was a little bit appreciative, a little bit grateful, a little bit more humble than she found it within her power to be, and just to defer to superior knowledge, if only for a while. Instead of which, from the word go, it was gimme, gimme, grab, stuff in my mouth. And it's really, it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy.
I concur completely. It has been taking all the time and giving absolutely zero. Yeah, it's like when we talk about the seven deadly signs, greed. I mentioned that word a lot of my videos, and we could say that they have all sorts of flaws, and you're exposing them not only in your book but right now in terms of Meghan wanting to take over and over and over again. Like, that was the worst plan that I can imagine. But one thing that that my passion is human behavior. I would like to understand how people work, the body language, and what happens in people's minds when they have this secret intentions. And one of the mysteries has been Harry, because Meghan is like her actions speak for themselves, right? But many people have this dichotomy about Harry. Is he a victim of Meghan, or is he doing things on purpose? This has been one of the questions that still baffles me, and you are the one to answer this.
But I think it's actually a combination of the two. I think she has brought out Harry's latent dark side, which was always there, but it was contained as much as possible. I mean, it was never totally contained. For instance, he attacked a friend of mine who is a lord, who's his father's age, or nearly his father's age. And I mean, first of all, a young whippersnapper doesn't attack an older person. And even if you're a young prince, you don't attack an eminent older lord for no reason at all, but because you are full of bile. And this friend of mine said to him, he was threatening to attack him physically. And this friend of mine, who'd been a boxing blue at Eton, said, "Come on, you little something or the other." And I won't repeat what he said, but he said, "Come on, I'll beat you to a pulp and teach you a lesson," as his security guys were holding him back. So this was Harry before Meghan. So there was definitely Meghan found fertile seed for her fertilizer, and it was there. Had it not been there, she couldn't have encouraged it to grow and develop the way it has. But had he married someone else, and let's remember, everybody is a mixture of destructive and constructive. Some people more so than others. But had he married anybody else, I'm absolutely sure we wouldn't be seeing any of what is going on now.
Interesting. And maybe from that sparks this contentiousness that you also mentioned towards the monarchy, and more personally towards the royal family. But what is the reason? What is the why is that contemptuousness towards the traditions, towards the monarchy, towards Britain? Where does that come from? Is many people have said, "Oh, she is American, she is this and that," but I don't think anyone really nails the description of where does that come from. And maybe you have.
I think it comes from the fact that she is an uppity, arrogant oik, and she has the spirit of an oik. She's very well educated. She went to very fine schools. She was encouraged to have good manners. She was taught to have good manners. The rest of her family, they all have good manners, whether the black side or the white side. I mean, some of them are more eccentric than others, but that's fine. They don't have bad manners. She has bad manners. And she is spoiled, self indulgent, and arrogant. And this is her character. And, as long as it suited her to play at being cooperative, she was cooperative. If you see her in earlier interviews, she espouses the virtues of appreciation and gratitude and says how lucky she is. And as soon as she was in a position of what she thought was invincibility, she just let rip with all of that, and everything was jettisoned. And you saw the monster of egotism that this woman truly is.
Yeah, absolutely. We have seen that. How funny is this that I remember in 2018, I did not have my YouTube channel yet, the Battle Language Guy, but I still had these requests. Hey, can you analyze Meghan Markle? I say, Meghan, who is that? I don't know. I have absolutely no knowledge of what was going on with the British royal family. But it's like she has been doing this out in the open. And now that you mentioned something very important, that is her family, that she had all these opportunities thanks to her dad, that she had this upbringing in the best schools, and her family, especially of course her father and her half brother and half sister, in with your knowledge of what was going on, maybe without giving out too much, how much credible can we think of them, of all that they claim about Meghan? Because that's something that people want to know. And I want to know that. I watch what they say with, of course, trying to be balanced in my appreciation of their claims. But I want to know what you think about not only Thomas Markle Jr., but Samantha as well, and of course, Thomas Markle Sr.
Well, I think they have reeled from the embarrassment and the humiliation and the rejection and the revilement that she set them up for and exposed them to. And they didn't expect it. They had always got along perfectly well. As with many families that live in different places, they didn't see each other very frequently, but they were all in touch with each other. And, my sisters live in the United States of America. I don't see them sometimes for a year or two, or sometimes even longer. Or sometimes I don't see them for 5, 6 years. But there's no doubt that if they need me or I need them, we pick up the phone. Oh, that's what happens in all families, even when there's conflict. And there's conflict in all families. But I know that Thomas Markle has struggled to come to terms with the fact that for 36 years, he thought he had a daughter who loved him. And then he discovered he had a daughter who didn't love him, who never even sent him an invitation to her wedding. And when he queried her as to where the invitation was, she said, well, it must have got lost in the post. I mean, you could make it up.
Yeah, that's terrible. That's terrible. And especially what you say, that they were just thrown in this public embarrassment and with absolutely no warning of what was going to happen. That must have been really hurtful. And well, nobody can expect that. Well, we know that everything that has to do with the royal family and with extended family is always going to be headlines internationally. So this is something that Meghan knew was going to happen, doing this to her family. So that is we add that to that list of flaws, could be, or sins of Meghan. But in this side of the Atlantic, talking about family, because this is mainly family drama. We know that families is something that is very close to us, the most important thing for us. And another most very important question that I had this is they infuriated Queen Elizabeth, the late Queen Elizabeth, in more than one occasion. What can you say about how Queen Elizabeth reacted to that? How could she deal with the Meghan?
Well, of course, at first she rather liked Meghan. And, because Meghan went out of her way to be pleasant, but also the family was very relieved that Meghan was able to control Harry, because Harry was uncontrollable and had always been. So, although they did not want the marriage, once they realized the marriage was going to take place, they thought, well, she controls Harry, so that's a good thing. And also, she's a woman of color, which is a great thing. So, but had she not been a woman of color, I'm pretty sure the marriage would not have been allowed to proceed, because they knew that Meghan was wildly unsuited as a character. And then, I mean, the royal family, if you're close to them, they do background checks on everyone. So there's really nothing that Meghan has in her past that they at some point didn't find out about. But I think that once the marriage was on the cards, the Queen was very good at making the best of things. And also, she was used to having harmony where there was divisiveness. For instance, her mother and her husband did not like each other and did not get on. And her mother, Queen Elizabeth, Queen Mother, and Prince Philip, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, tried to jockey for position and have influence over Lilibet that Philip didn't approve of. And so there was a lot of tension between her mother and her husband. And she was used to having these pressures and these tensions within the family and reconciling them so everybody ticked along with a superficial harmony. And she expected that to happen with Meghan. And when she discovered that it was not happening and was not going to happen, I mean, she described Meghan as a wicked, wicked girl.
Yeah, that is a very appropriate and a very appropriate nickname for Meghan. But in that case, you mentioned something really interesting, that being Meghan biracial, that they went along for with a wedding. Is that some kind of way the royal family could benefit for that, or see that it was something good for the royal family? Because I would like to know more about that.
Oh, absolutely. It was wonderful for the royal family. The Queen was the head of the Commonwealth. The Prince of Wales at the time they hoped would be nominated the head of the Commonwealth, which he ultimately was. And, the Commonwealth is largely people of color. I mean, the Commonwealth is the largest bloc of nations on earth. And a large percentage of the population within the Commonwealth is people of color. And to have a member of the royal family acknowledged as being a person of color was going to be a wonderful thing. And now I'm Jamaican. I may be a white Jamaican, but I'm Jamaican. And, I come from a culture that is the national motto is out of many one people. And we aim for racial harmony, and we're at the forefront of harmonious racial and progressive racial relations in the 1950s and 60s, long before the United Kingdom or the United States. And, and you know, I understand on a very atavistic level how, and also I get information from people in the West Indies and African diplomats, that sort of thing, as to how wonderful it was. And everybody had such high hopes. And, as my builder, who's appeared on a television show that was done of the restoration of the castle, he said to me, well, Lady C, we don't care what she's, as long as yard in the palace, that is all that counts. And that really, and she had the most wonderful opportunity for harmonious and improved relations within, in harmonious race relations, and to add something, instead of which she has implemented divisiveness. And it's such a wasted opportunity, and it's been so damaging to the Commonwealth as well. I mean, I've had diplomats from various Commonwealth countries come up to me at receptions and say to me, I usually don't know who they are, they know who I am. And they come up to me and they say things like, keep up the good work. We actually think that you need to continue to beat that drum because, she needs to be stopped. I mean, and I think, in fact, thanks to people like you, and dare I say me, she has been stopped in her tracks. And hopefully she will be stopped even more, because had it not been for people like you, she would have been able to get away with what she has done, because the mainstream media were remarkably silent, because they were terrified of being accused of racism. Well, nobody can accuse me of racism. I'm Jamaican. So, and I don't think they can accuse you because you're Venezuelan.
No, I am biracial, as well. So that's my card. I am biracial like Meghan. That's what I can say. But yes, in my case, it was from the Oprah interview onwards. Someone suggested that I analyze the Oprah interview, and I took a look at it, and it just exploded back then. And the rest is history. But something that you say, that so many people had high hopes for Meghan. We're talking about millions of people had high hopes for Meghan and the royal family and the monarchy. Had so much potential. We know it wasn't, but it was so much potential. What was the turning point in which the majority of those supporters of Meghan as an upcoming and an actual new member of the royal family began to turn into critics? Was there a turning point that you can mention specifically?
Well, I think looking back at it, the turning point started with the Oprah interview, because up until then, Meghan had done things, made accusations that really couldn't be easily disproved. She'd accused the British press and Harry had accused the British press of being racist when they hadn't. The British press went out of their way and they still go out of their way to not address many of the main issues of her conduct and his that they should be addressing, because they are terrified of being accused of racism. But I think so she and Harry had been playing the race card, and they'd been playing the victim card from the word go. They started to play the victim and the race card from the week after she managed to get the relationship between them exposed in the Sunday Express. And he got Jason Knopf to issue a statement that has her fingerprints all over it. She's a victim of racism, blah, 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 all of which was utter rubbish. I mean, nobody was, and also that she was a victim of sexism. Well, I mean, I'm sorry, she's a woman, he's a man. Of course, sex is going to come into it. The whole thing, just preposterous nonsense. But all of these accusations, I think, had, if not merit, they were people weren't able to nail down the inaccuracy and the unfairness of it all until the Oprah interview. And remember, in the run-up to the Oprah interview, Prince Philip was in the hospital. Everybody knew Prince Philip was dying, including Harry and Meghan. And they were insensitive enough to declare that Prince Philip was most likely, or their people were insensitive enough to declare that Prince Philip was most likely faking it so that the interview would have to be postponed. Well, of course, but when people saw the interview and the number of lies, and then she immediately used her, at the time, extreme influence to get Piers Morgan dismissed. And then Sharon Osbourne in the United States was dismissed. And all of a sudden, you had both sides of the Atlantic household names being toppled because this race-baiting bitch, which is what she is, was flexing her muscles and destroying people's careers. And I think at that point, so hang on a second. There are at least 17 lies in the interview. Harry and Meghan themselves
17.
don't agree on the most important part of the interview, which is the racist accusations. He says it was one conversation before they were married. She says it was a series of conversations while she was pregnant with Harry. Oh, sorry, pregnant with Archie. And so they don't even agree on the most fundamental of their complaints. And I think people at that point thought, hang on a second, what's going on here? And it was a bit of an eye-opener. Since when the lies and the dramas and the preposterous claims, a 2-hour car chase, 80 miles an hour in Midtown Manhattan for 2 hours. I mean,
Yes. Unbelievable.
But it's been one preposterous bit of nonsense or after the other. And I think they have exposed themselves. I don't think that people have exposed them. I think they have exposed themselves and opened people's eyes to their total lack of authenticity, sincerity, responsibility, or decorum.
Absolutely. They have exposed themselves. I think most of us, and I include myself, is we have just connected the dots to point out the inconsistencies along years of saying this, saying that. And in many ways, her fans have attacked the British media, have attacked us because claiming that, that we are racist, that we haven't been racist, but we have tried to, at least myself, I tried to focus on that, on the character flaws. Okay, and that is regardless if someone is a man or a woman or is black or white, that doesn't matter. A character flaw is when you are evil. Okay, we could say that maybe is a rather basic term, but we could say that there's that evilness, and when you do things purposefully to hurt other people and purposefully to dismantle that privilege and that opportunity that you have. I think that's what I have seen in Meghan through the last 3 years that I have been analyzing her. But from your perspective, and all these flaws in Meghan that she had, do you think what could Meghan and Harry, but let's say Meghan, let's focus this time on Meghan. what could Meghan could have done differently, hypothetically, to not uh, to prevent all this? What would have been the ideal? Of course, considering who Meghan is, because we cannot change who Meghan is, her character. But what could have been the middle ground to maybe stay in the as a working royal? You think that could have been possible?
Well, I mean, she was sufficiently disciplined to utilize charm as and when it was in her interest to do so, as she was hustling her way up the ladder. If you look at some of the interviews that she had, even with people like Larry King, but loads of interviews, she clutches herself and she's all, and I'm just, I love you so much, and I'm so grateful for all the opportunities that I've been given, and I'm just a study in being appreciative, and I'm so lucky. And then overnight, she just drops the act. Had she kept up that act, and had she been as cooperative as she was while she was a cast member, admittedly only number 6, but still an ensemble player in Suits, she would have done her occasional royal duties. She would have dressed in keeping, because I'm pretty sure she didn't say to the producers of Suits, no, I want to wear a negligee into the office. No, I'm going to go to court in an evening dress. But she shows up at royal occasions, which are formal day wear, in cocktail attire. She shows up at a church service in a cocktail dress, as if she's going to drinks party to knock back booze. She shows up to events with the Queen. Her first engagement with the Queen. She's instructed to wear a hat. She doesn't wear a hat, so she spends the whole time trying to keep the hair of those 300 Turkish virgins from flopping all about the place. And had she just been as disciplined and cooperative as she was on Suits, and I know she wasn't that cooperative or disciplined either, because a friend of my children's, who's Canadian, knows a lot of the people who interacted with her on Suits, and she was disliked intensely, except for a small cabal of people. She always had her favorite makeup artist, hairdresser, blah, 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 and surrounded herself with them. But she was not popular on Suits either. But she was disciplined enough and cooperative enough to understand that she needed to give something in terms of cooperation, and she did. So she was successful. Had she taken those lessons and applied them to being royal, she'd have shown up, maybe occasionally not totally appropriately dressed, but she wouldn't have been consistently inappropriately dressed. She would have behaved herself properly. She would have shown some respect for the institution and the protocols and the customs of this country and its people, instead of which she showed her contempt for the monarchy, for the traditions of the monarchy, for the traditions of the British people, and for the feelings of the British people. And then she started with all the lies, that she was subjected to racism and nobody welcomed her, when in fact the Queen had Lady Susan Hussey, the Queen had Sophie Wessex, as she then was, blah, blah, blah. Samantha Cohen, Samantha Cohen was parachuted in to take care of Meghan. And but that's but she herself has said she wanted to be She-Ra, rebel princess. So she was showing contempt from the word go. Had she, as I say, behaved the way she had behaved while she was a cast member of Suits, she wouldn't, and nobody would have known, because the palace is very careful wherever possible to keep its problems and messes private. She would have she would have continued to be as popular as she was at the beginning, because she would like people to believe that she had a hard time from the word go. She didn't. She was embraced by the British press, and that again is some, and by the British people and by the royal family. And even her accusations about the British press playing the race card, they never played the race card against her. As she said on Netflix, she was outraged that the British press described her as black. She couldn't understand that to them that was a positive to describe her as black. Me, I'm not black. Black. So that shows
Yes.
her attitude to her African heritage. It doesn't show anybody else's hatred. It shows her own self-hatred, in my view.
I think that I remember that was it made watching the 6 hours of the Harry and Meghan documentary all worthwhile, when there was one scene in which Meghan was, I think, talking to Doria in a car or something, and she says like something normal. No, I never felt like a black person until I entered the royal family. I said, well, if you never felt like a black person, then what exactly are you complaining about? I don't understand that. That completely deconstructed the claims about racism. You have never really felt black, and then how can you? It's like someone calling me an alien. I have never felt like an alien. Well, sometimes, in fact, but you get the idea. It's like there's nothing in me that can react to something that I have never felt like that. That doesn't work. But you mentioned something that back in those Suits days, Meghan was not liked by everyone, but she had this cabal of people that supported her, and I'm sure that some of them still support her. But the problem that I see is that Meghan felt like she was bigger than the concept of the monarchy, the concept of the royal family, bigger than or beyond those traditions. Like, I can bring this, like, in the new, into the future. Okay, I came to modernize, and some of the headlines that were pro Meghan say something like that. She comes to modernize. You know that word doesn't mean anything really, because modernize is simply keeping up with the times. It's as long as you keep up with the times, and you're good to go. But I think she lost that opportunity on that support. But regarding that cabal, do you think Meghan has run out of supporters? We know that there's Tyler Perry, that I guess that he still supports her, but I don't know if there's anyone else that is still actively supporting Meghan, because so many people, she has dumped so many friends.
I think
that
a lot of them have dumped her.
Yes.
I don't think she's dumped everybody. I think a lot of people have dumped her. A lot of people have put distance between her and them. I think that she has exposed herself as being toxic, and people don't like being around poison. And she is a poisonous brand, and people don't want to avail themselves of the opportunity of being poisoned, of being dragged down with her. I think it's as simple as that. She has exposed herself. Nobody has exposed her. Nobody has unfairly accused Meghan of anything. Meghan has shown us what she is. And people have gradually said the scales have fallen off people's eyes. And I don't think she has that many supporters of any eminence whatsoever. And I know she certainly doesn't have any in this country. And I know that I have friends who are Hollywood royalty. And to a man and woman, they want to have nothing whatsoever to do with Meghan. And I'll tell you better, which people don't seem to understand. Her father worked with an awful lot of very eminent stars, and he was very respected. And this is something that doesn't seem to have hit the public consciousness, that an awful lot of people in Hollywood thought, hang on a second, we know Thomas Markle. This is outrageous what's being done to him. So there's that going on as well. But even with people who didn't know Thomas Markle, people don't want to be associated with anything sleazy, and they don't want to be associated with controversy that is going to be detrimental to their ultimate financial and reputational well-being. And people, Meghan and Harry, to an extent, have given people a clear choice. Choose me or the royal family. Well, most people are going to go where the power is, number one. But number two, yes, when right is on the side of the power and wrong is on the side of the perpetrators posing as victims, of course people aren't going to go in that direction. So I think they have undone themselves by revealing too much of what they are as individuals. And she is the driving force behind all of this. He's the follower. He may be an enthusiastic follower, but she has been the creator. She has been the architect. She is the author, the playwright, the director, the producer, the star, and he's along for the ride. And he has at times found it thrilling, and at other times he has obviously not found it thrilling. But nobody forced him to go along for the ride, and nobody is telling him you need to stay on that loose cannon that's hurtling into really into perdition.
Yes, absolutely. He is still with the right. Nobody is forcing him at all. Lady C, I have one last question that is rather funny. You know that right now, let's talk about Netflix. You know that Netflix, anything that is royal, they try to milk anything that is royal. They have The Crown. Lately, they have this movie called The Scoop about Prince Andrew's interview. That they're desperate for all this content. And one could say that at some point they could say, hey, Lady C, we want to make a miniseries or a movie about your book. And Netflix does a movie about your book. What part of your book, what scene, what would be, absolutely has to be on that Netflix production or that streaming service production?
What part of the book?
What part of the book?
I would have said the theme of the book is what is of interest. It's how a woman hustles her way with charm and determination and energy and a certain degree of resourcefulness, let's put it that way, and uses all her talents and charms to get where she wants to get to. Oh, you are loved. Everybody loves me too. Remember the bananas? And And I think that it's, if they show that this is somebody who uses slender gifts and great determination to arrive at a position of tremendous eminence, one of the most important positions in the world, and then destroys it because of her greed, her lack of vision of what is possible, because she's so focused on really the inessentials and misses the essentials. And I mean, had she, and then just, so I really think it's a study in character. And I mean, let me put it this way as well. Had Meghan really been clever, and had this just been a career move, that she was going to marry him and milk the situation for all it was worth so she could end up being a billionairess. Had she really been clever, she'd have stayed in the British royal family. She'd have pretended to be as cooperative as she pretended on Suits. She would have put in a 3 or 4 or 5 years covered in honor, and she would have then discovered that she was really miserable and had to move on. And she'd have found some billionaire with a yacht of 400 feet, 4 decks, a huge plane, an island, several houses. And she could have done a Jackie. I knew Jackie Kennedy, so I know what I'm talking about. She could have done a Jackie. I also knew Arionarsis. I mean, he bought quality merchandise. He bought the most eminent widow on earth. Meghan would have been a tremendously eminent duchess, and then she would have been desirable. I don't think any billionaire in his right mind would want her. Maybe if she gets a drug-addicted billionaire with no brains whatsoever, and whose brains have been blown many years before, and then she might be able to make the move. But I think she's trapped herself, because she has exposed herself, and she's dragged him down with her. And I think the whole thing is a shame and a tragedy. And I really don't see that there is any way of turning it around, save if they throw their hands up, do a mea culpa, and say, oh, well, we have discovered we had huge problems, and we are now in treatment. And we are an example of what happens when you lost your way, but we found our way with 12-step program or whatever the program is. I think failing that, there is no way, there is no rehabilitation possible for either of them. What do you think?
Well, I always have a faith in that people can redeem themselves. The problem is that you sometimes go through a point of there is, for public life, no return. If you want to do something as a public figure, comes a point that everything that you have done in the past is not going to cut it. You can redeem yourself in private, you can change yourself, but redeem your public brand at this point for either Meghan and Harry together or separate, for me, is really difficult. I see this, I don't see it possible, especially because they have that trajectory that you were mentioning at the start. That trajectory keeps going downwards, and everything that they have done up to this point still paints or taints whatever they're doing right now. So even if they are doing things, or they, for example, that Meghan went and read books at this children's hospital in these days, that is in itself a nice thing to do. But just the fact that she brings the cameras and she begins to use it for PR, that's the Meghan that we know. Is that your reputation will always talk for yourself, and that's what it's going to, well, just not be possible a public redemption. So, Lady C, thank you for this opportunity to interview you. It has been an honor. It has been really insightful, and just happy just to be able to have this conversation with you. I wish you real success, more success with your book, Meghan and Harry, the real story, persecutors or victims. And well, I think I hope that this is an opportunity to repeat this kind of conversations in the future.
Jesus, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure. I have enjoyed every minute of it. Thank you very much.
Well, Rogues, I would love to know what you think about this in the comments. My name is Jesus Enrique Rosas. I'm the Royal Rogue, and remember that you can get Lady C's book using the link in the description of this video. Much love and bliss.